Good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael Herrera with MHA Consulting. Welcome to our webinar, BCM Return on Investment is the New Black. It's being presented to you today by MHA Consulting. We thank you for your valuable time, and we hope this webinar will provide you with information you can use to make your job easier as practitioners as you go through your day-to-day tasks. So thank you again for joining us, and let us get started. MHA Consulting, we're a global business continuity firm with 18 years of experience. We have a seasoned team of consultants. We provide a full range of consulting services. And with that also, we have a unique set of SaaS-based tools to help you assess your compliance, your residual risk, and also conduct your business impact analysis. We have a diverse global client base that spans across many industries and geographies. There are clients on this page that with BCM programs that have high returns on investment. Some have moderate, some have low return on investment, or no return on investment. You know, what is amazing is when you look at all these organizations, whether they are public, private, or government in nature, most, if not all, are still always asking, what is the return on investment of different projects or initiatives they implement? But what is interesting, all these years, even though business continuity is a relatively new industry, is that in many cases, none of them ever ask, what is the true return on investment on business continuity? And as we all know, as critical as business continuity is to our institutions today and their survival, it is amazing still it's not being asked. And we all know that budgets continue to grow dramatically with regards to business continuity. You know, we see clients with, of course, 7-figure business continuity budgets, 8-figure business continuity budgets. So the ability to truly understand what is my return on investment to ensure recoverability is becoming more critical as time proceeds. The last piece I'll put on, I will provide you with about MHA, this is always, we provide a full set of comprehensive services that spans from the initial program assessment to development and implementation of strategies and solutions, development of response and recovery plans, the conducting of recovery exercises, and most importantly is always maintaining all of this and having a set of continuous improvement methodologies. And again, we have proven success in all of these areas. What's our agenda today? So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about 4 key areas that include 1, what is return on investment? What does it mean? Why you should know your ROI on your business continuity management program, why it's important to you, why it's important to the organization and your stakeholders. How should I measure it? There's traditional ways that people have attempted to measure ROI, and today, as an organization and also talking with other practitioners, we're kind of presenting today what we think is how you potentially should consider calculating your ROI. And then lastly, what do I do once I report it? You know, and I think as an industry, it's time to move from the days of using how many people have seen volume-related statistics still being used, number of BIAs completed, the number of plans documented, the number of exercises held. You know, it's quite interesting versus that people are still using this data to show some ROI and or being used as part of the performance review, when in essence it's not really telling me what the health or wellness is of the program, and more importantly, have I minimized risk the most and can I recover? So we need to move away from that, and I think the times are changing. We have access to now great information and the ability to generate new information and data that will allow us to calculate ROI. So I ask you to have an open mind today as we talk about how do we do this, and again, our approach into doing this. Pardon me here. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the BCM environment. I think we all know that in today's BCM environment, we see a lot of changes, a lot for the better, I will tell you that. I think you're starting to see a higher level of legislation, regulation standards are more stringent. They're now truly requiring that business continuity measures be verifiable. I believe gone are the days, especially from the financial institution perspective or other clients who are hyper vigilant. They're really wanting to see if it's verifiable or not. It's no longer just showing people, here's the book, here's the steps. They want to see, can you recover or not? One of the things we've seen, especially those industries that are regulated, we find that the regulators are definitely have a higher level of focus, the auditors as well, and customers. They know what to ask today. They know what to look for. They have no issue coming to you. If you're critical, the ones that are doing this as a best practice have no issue coming to your office sitting down with you and really seeing what's there. So a lot of this ROI is also a form of due diligence for yourself, giving you the ability to really tell people ahead of time for you to know where you stand before you have to deal with this. Thirdly, we're also seeing that management, especially again in those where there's audit findings, we're seeing management increasingly being held to a higher level of accountability, especially with key findings coming out from different institutions, organizations for clients. We're finding that management is being held accountable for it, and if they're not able to resolve it, there's definitely actions that are being taken. We've seen that happen. And lastly, and I think what is good is finally non-regulated businesses in all industries are now being required to show evidence of BCM. Some clients we know that are non-regulated don't like that. They feel it's an intrusion and or will only try to check the box, while others are looking at it and saying, hey, it's making us a better business and better able to serve and take care of our stakeholders. So I think it's time now to start being use due diligence in a positive way. It's more, instead of being reactive, you're being proactive and really doing the due diligence as to where you stand and not being afraid of what do we find when we do this. And it should be part of your regular basis of trying to figure out where do you stand. So from a definition perspective, what is return on investment? And the traditional definition is it's the amount of return on an investment relative to what it cost me, an investment cost. And of course, with business continuity, that's time, that's your money, the different levels of money you have implemented or budgeted for and actually utilized, as well as all your resources. You know, and that resources is also technology, it's people, all those things that come together to come up, what does BCM cost me? You know, in some organizations, like I said, the budget is less than 7 figures, and others it's 7 figures, and others it's 8 figures. What did all that cost me? But what does it really mean to me in the end? Am I doing what I'm supposed to with that investment of time, money, and resources? Now, a lot of people say, why should I even care about the return on investment of my BCM program? Management isn't asking, auditors aren't asking, customers aren't asking. So a lot of places it's just do what you're doing. Everything is fine. But you know, once you really look at return on investment, it's like anything else. If you look at your investment portfolio and it doesn't have the return on investment you're looking for, in many cases you'll move it, you'll make changes. Same thing goes with this. We got to make sure we know where we're at. So is everything being optimized? Is my investment being optimized? So it's very important that you do that, because a high return on investment promotes management's confidence in the foundation and the recoverability of your program. That's what you want to go to management with and say, we have a high return on investment. I can easily show that, guess what? We have a foundational health and we have recoverability health. We have both. That's comes to be a high ROI in your program. So that's really important that you do that. There's a couple of other things that I do want to say before I get to the value of ROI that we have learned. And we've kind of learned this over time, talking to so many people. I will tell you, having a high ROI or even a low one is a few things. It's not dependent on the number of staff. Just because you hire more staff doesn't mean you're going to have a higher or lower ROI necessarily. It's not dependent on what budget you have. That is very important for everybody to know. We've seen budgets that are very small and very large still be very successful. It's not dependent on having the best tools. In a lot of cases, people will think you need to have really outstanding tools to do this. And my opinion is, if you don't have the right process and methodology, it won't matter if you buy a 6-figure tool. You need to have the right process and methodology to do it right, whether you use technology or not. Additionally, what we find to have a high return on investment on your program, it's going to take about 5 to 7 years. It's not something that you can create a high ROI quickly. It's not something that does take time to get in place and to adequately develop over time so that you get to that place. And most importantly, what we found in creating ROI for your program, return on investment, is you really need to have sound strategic planning coupled with good tactical implementation. And what I mean by that, in many cases, we'll find where planners will have a strategic roadmap, but they don't do so well on the tactical implementation of that roadmap. And that's what really slows them down, and it impacts their ROI directly. So what is the value of return on investment? Very important. We always hear people want to be able to defend their resources, right? So by calculating your return on investment, it allows you to defend the resources that you have and how they're being used. If you're doing an excellent job and you have a high return on investment, it becomes much easier to defend it. Okay. Additionally, if your return on investment is not as high and you know where gaps or risks are, it's easier for you to go in and ask for things and to defend why you're asking for them. So that's really important. Additionally, it'll improve support for your existing programs. Whatever you have in place, that'll be helpful to have that number and clearly understand what's behind that number. It'll also help create approval and funding decisions for new projects that you have. This is the other thing we have. People will have issues with, I need a new and alternate site. I need a new recovery strategy. I need a new backup capability. It helps create that approval and funding decisions because you will now know what your ROI is, where the gaps are, and where to put task management for. And very importantly, I think that this is something that a lot of practitioners could use to their advantage, is by having an outstanding ROI calculation, it allows you to demonstrate the contributions of your team to your organization. If you're doing an exceedingly good job, this is the perfect way to show management. I've done my best. Here's the numbers behind it. I'm giving you good return on investment, which goes back to you and your team, which then goes back to how you're perceived as well as your performance, your raises, etc. So it's very important to do that. Okay. So what factors are critical to determining BCM ROI? You know, a lot of cases, a lot of folks will, they'll utilize some common ROI benchmarks. They will use your savings in staffing, equipment, and insurance. And there's one thing I want to say about the insurance side. In all the years I've been in business continuity, 25 plus years, I have yet to see where by having a business continuity program, an insurance provider has reduced the insurance requirements or the costs. And over the years, either I wasn't listening, but I'm going to tell you, I have yet to see it. And I still believe that a lot of insurance organizations aren't finally in tune in their risk managers. I did a risk presentation for the local group of enterprise risk managers. Very few had a true good understanding of business continuity, what the risk was with business continuity, and how it minimized risk and how it could affect insurance. So it was quite interesting to see that. So common ones would always be, hey, can I save money? Did I save equipment costs? How about insurance costs? What were my potential savings and lost revenue, fines, and penalties? All the basic things we used to try to look like, which were often hard to quantify. And again, very elusive, and a lot of times management would say, hey, that's good, but it's really hard to quantify. Is it a real one? Is it a real cost? And then also a lot of people would measure ROI, like I said earlier, just the volume of work they completed. But that really didn't say, was your program recoverable? Did you reduce the most risk, et cetera? So those were the old ways of doing it. So what are some of the new ways? What are some new methodologies? Again, by measuring ROI, we just talked about the traditional method, which was looking at more of a savings element, compiling the cost, determining the cost savings and potential savings. But I think the new way now is a methodology, something that I've seen and working with a number of folks. I have actually seen this work and using our clients and the history of our clients and actually using it with our customers is one, here it is. First and foremost, you do need to assess and quantify the compliance or your alignment with standards in your program. Whether you're a regulated industry or not, you still should be in alignment with standards and you should measure it. So that's number one. That's the first part of the new way to measure ROI. Understand and measure the level of a compliance or alignment with standards. Number two, not necessarily a new methodology, but it's not really truly being applied across the board in business continuity, is evaluating and understanding the level of residual risk. And we're going to get into both of these very quickly. But understanding these two components, how compliant or aligned I am with standards, what's the level of residual risk, enterprise residual risk in my program, allows me then to calculate what my return on investment is. These two work well together and help calculate that ROI. There's been some other articles out there on the web with regard to others that have said residual risk is one way to calculate ROI. I really believe this, coupled with compliance, allows these two components then tell your management what your return on investment is. Okay, so I believe, again, business continuity management return on investment is equal to enterprise compliance and residual risk. Let's go a little deeper into these. When they're properly weighted and combined, it's really going to tell me a few things. It's going to tell me if the resources, time, money invested have produced a program that's two things. One, by being aligned and in compliance with standards, it's foundationally sound, which we all know if you're foundationally sound, it promotes success. It promotes lower residual risk. You have to have that foundation set. And two, more importantly, By having a low level of residual risk, it's minimized the risk to a level that's in accordance with what my management sees as its risk tolerance. So let's do that again. Two things. Enterprise compliance. If I have good enterprise compliance or alignment with standards, it tells me that my foundation is sound, which then promotes success in lowering residual risk. And then the second component, residual risk, is really saying, hey, I have minimized the risk to the most, to the level that management would like me to reduce it to. That's the beauty of using residual risk. Because it's up to what your management sees as their tolerance, you're doing your best to what they see as the level of risk they're willing to tolerate. These two combined in a weighted manner adds up to your ROI. So let's cover how we would do that. Let's start with the first component, compliance. So, compliance is defined as being in a state of accordance with established standards, and there's so many standards out there. Here's the interesting part. In our research and doing informal surveys, what is scary to us in hundreds of practitioners we've surveyed, because I typically like to do this during my classes at DRJ or Continuity Insights or webinars or others, is a lot of times you'll ask, and less than 10% of those we've surveyed are even using a standard, let alone multiple. The standards are out there. So when you're looking at standards, you have great standards you can use now in order to see, here's the guide, the Bible on how to build a program. There's ISO 22301, there's FFIC for financial institutions, there's BCI good practices, NFPA 1600, which is an outstanding free standard for business continuity. There's NIST 800. So there's many standards out there for you to take a look at how do I align with them. And it's not a difficult process to figure out where do I stand 0 to 100 overall. I'll give you that in just a second. But so compliance, being in a state of accordance with these standards, I really want people to think of compliance as being, it's the fitness regime for BCM. It's making sure that if you follow these steps, your program is going to be in the best shape possible. It's going to make sure you've done the most sit-ups, the push-ups, the running, all those things to make sure that by having the right BIA template in place, the right threat and risk template, the right business recovery plan template, the right testing program standards and policies, the right exercise schedules, the right maintenance. By doing all these things, puts you in the right fitness level in order for you to then reduce the most residual risk you can. Again, very few people are doing this. Very few people don't want to. And again, when we've talked to a lot of BCM practitioners, they'll say, why don't they do it? They'll tell us management doesn't know, doesn't want to know, they're not asking, it takes too much time. The sad part is too many programs are being designed by the practitioner without any reference back to proven ways to design a program. So if there's anything out of this, I ask you, look at what the standards are out there, use them as your fitness guide for your program. It will serve you well, not just today, but more importantly in the future as your program grows. So the ways we look at compliance is this. If you don't have a tool to do it, well, we typically tell folks, go to one of these standards. They're broken out for you already. They're broken out to business impact analysis, crisis management, recovery. Take a look at all the requirements and simply go through and measure yourself, red, green, or yellow for each of those. Add those all up. Come up with the percentage of enterprise compliance across all those areas. And then rank yourself. Where do I stand? Am I 0 to 60, which means I have a low level of compliance? Am I 61 to 80, moderate level? Or am I superior level of fitness or compliance, 81 to 100? So give yourself a baseline. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it gives you your first component of ROI, knowing where I stand on the 0 to 100 scale by using one standard. I would recommend start with one standard as your baseline, and then over time you can expand. One thing I'll tell you too, even the folks that we know that work with us on compliance and assessment of their programs, very few are in the 80 to 100 range overall. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes consistent application of a roadmap. So that's number one. That's the first component of ROI. So the second, very important, is the most difficult. This is a brand new methodology or approach. Not many people are using residual risk in their business continuity programs. But what's important is many others have been using it forever. You look at any of NASA, you look at any organizations that's dealing construction, scientific related industries, they all use residual risk because what they really want to do is figure out what's the most I need, what's the risk remaining after I've implemented all the controls that I possibly can to the highest level possible? Because there's maybe some risk that we accept, risk we transfer, risk we do everything to eliminate, we spend all the money we can, and there's some risk we just decide we're not going to do anything with. So that's really important. One last thing before I forget, I have it on my notes here that goes back to compliance, goes back to standards. I always want to know, when you talk to people, it's like, would you go to a hospital or take a drug or use an airline that wasn't built according to standards? So probably not. So remember that, because why are we building programs without standards? So I didn't want to forget that note. So just remember that when we ask you, we're having such a dependence on our programs. So remember, okay? So back to residual risk though. I think what is critical here is a number of considerations here. And we're always willing to help you. If any of you have questions after, please send us your questions, because this is not easy to implement. If you go out to the internet, there's always residual risk calculations. So here's how we've applied it and some of the considerations to do this. Really, residual risk tells me what your game time execution is. If you have good alignment with standards, you're fit, you're ready to go. Residual risk then tells me I've implemented, I've executed to the highest level possible. So some of the things we have to take in consideration. We typically will assess residual risk at the business unit recovery plan level. And we usually focus on the most critical plans. Some of our clients will say, hey, I want you to look at the residual risk of our plan 72 hours or less, or 5 days or less. Typically, it's a small set of plans that are most critical to the survival of the company. And here's what we take into consideration. For each plan, we look at its inherent risk, which is basically how critical is that plan overall? What's the risk to the company if that plan, if we have to activate that plan and that plan is unable to be unable to successfully recover? We look at the risk tolerance. This is what management is willing to accept. So that's really important, because the risk appetite is different than the risk tolerance. Risk tolerance really comes down to, what am I willing to accept? I'll give you an example. If you had a newborn toddler in your house and you had to go to work and you had to leave it with somebody, your risk tolerance for anything to happen to that baby is very low. So that's really important to remember. You yourself are willing to accept more risk or have a higher risk appetite and a risk tolerance. So now what we're finding is a lot of management teams are more willing to accept more risk than you think. And we found that by using this tool. So we've gone to talk to management, because we've stated lower risk tolerance means my controls have to be at a much higher level. Higher risk tolerance, my controls don't have to be as strong, because again, we're willing to accept more risk. So remember that. Mitigating controls. Because we're looking at business and IT recovery plans, we're looking at these types of controls. How good is my business impact analysis? My recovery strategy, my recovery exercise, my recovery plan, my training and awareness, my third-party supplier risk. We look at about 6 different factors for each plan. And each of those mitigating controls are rated 1 to 5. And we use a standard, using industry standards as what a 1 is, all the way as to what a 5 is for each of these controls. And we rate those, because that in the end will tell us how good our controls are in comparison to the inherent risk and the risk tolerance. So very important to remember that. What we see as the greatest residual risk when it comes to looking at plans, it's in 2 areas. It's recovery strategy and it's recovery exercises. And I came upon an interesting statistic just on my own, that if we would spend 65% of our time really working on strategies, solutions, and exercises to get those to the highest level, and 35% on everything else, I guarantee we have some great executable programs. That's what it all comes down to. Do I have the right strategies and solutions for the most critical units, and can they execute to the highest levels to recover? But that's typically where we find residual risk to be the worst in most organizations in their programs. Strategies, as well as the exercises. So when we're done with all of this, when we go and evaluate each RTO and the plans under it, typically what we find for each plan, 1, is it within or outside the tolerance of management that they set after looking at its controls. And in the end, it tells me at the end, by being outside or within tolerance, it's going to give me an idea as to, can I recover, can I not? What's my level of execution? So this graph here is just a representation of an actual look at a client's RTO 0 or business recovery plans, and they needed to be recovered in less than 4 hours. In those plans, 67% of those plans were outside the tolerance that management had set after we looked at their controls, their inherent risk, and only 33% were within tolerance. So if you took this back to management, you're quickly able then to tell them, here's where my greatest risk is. I lack superior recovery strategies. I lack superior levels of exercise. My plans are not written to the highest level. It allows you then over time to show them how you could quickly reduce your risk. So this is the second component of ROI. By combining and creating an enterprise level residual risk percentage coupled with an enterprise level alignment or compliance score, those two then can become your ROI number. Okay? Again, this is all new and always open up for discussion and interpretation as the industry moves forward. So, with that being said, the enterprise BCM ROI score is now equal. We typically like to weight our enterprise compliance score, and typically I will weight this around 40%, and I'll add that to the weighted enterprise residual risk. So what I'll do is I'll take a look at all my RTO zeros, my RTO ones, my RTO twos, for example. I'll get one weighted enterprise residual risk score, and I usually like to weight the enterprise residual risk by 60%. I'll add those two together, and it brings me one enterprise residual risk score. Now, how have I validated this? I've taken our clients that two ways. One, those that are doing exceedingly well, those that we know their compliance numbers, we know the residual risk, and then we just look at the actual program, and then vice versa. We look at those that aren't doing well. And this has really worked out well. Because I know now that if I set the right foundation and I've reduced risk to the minimum, there's a very good chance that guess what? A, I'm going to recover, and B, I've done a good job of investing time, money, and resources. It takes some time to do this, but it can be done. And it can be evolve over time to what fits your organization. And I'll be honest, the hardest part of this is not the alignment with standards. The residual risk piece takes the longest. And secondly, just getting management to understand what residual risk is, getting them to understand what you're looking for from what is the risk tolerance and what does that mean? You know, getting them to understand that if you have a lower risk tolerance, it's going to cost us more. We're going to have tighter controls, better capabilities in our strategies, our solutions, our exercises. Because what I'll tell you what happens is people will tell you, this is when I need to recover specific applications, processes, business units. But in many cases, they'll tell you that, but they're not willing to put in the controls in order to do that. So they'll be out of tolerance. And again, they're not even measuring, so they don't really know that exists. Okay. So, measuring ROI. So in the end, by taking my compliance number, weighting it, taking my overall enterprise residual risk score as well, if I have high compliance and I have low residual risk, typically that's going to tell me I have high return on investment. We always want that number to come out as one. Again, we usually like to use percentages. So it tells me that I have a solid foundation, that my recovery plans are operating at an optimal level, and my investment is being optimized. And that's really important to tell management. They need to know that. You've created a sound foundation. You've created the ability to execute and minimize the risk to the most. Those two then tell me basically where does that all end up and how I'm investing my time, money, and resources. Very important. And I think time is coming with the complexity of organizations, of processes, systems, and units. We really need to focus on what do we need to protect the most and where do we need to put our most effort versus being a very shotgun approach that we see in so many cases. By aligning yourself with standards, assessing the residual risk in your most critical areas allows you to bring that focus down to a really critical set of things that you can control. The second piece, if I show low compliance and I show high residual risk, that shows me right away we have low return on investment. We have a poor foundation, and a lot of times people will tell us, I don't want to use a standard, I'm not regulated, I don't need it. But again, as I told you, it's the right fitness program for it's free. Go out and find a standard, use it, build the right foundation, which will then promote low residual risk. It'll promote better performance, better use of time and resources. Spend that time to do that. Because in the end, it really comes down to how do our recovery plans operate? Whether that's IT, whether that's a business recovery plan, these two combinations of low compliance and high residual risk really tells me my plans are not operating at the right levels. Now, additionally, by measuring ROI in this way, it's really important that you know that this provides a systematic way of telling management how you stand and where you stand. So it's really important that you do that. It provides, again, a systematic method as you do this over time. And again, most organizations are not assessing where their program stands once a year, every 2 years. Some don't do it at all. We recommend you should look at your programs and where they stand at least once a year. Even if you're a highly mature, successful program, measure your ROI, measure your compliance, your residual risk, or other ways you use to measure it. Do that at least once a year. Know where you're at. It's like going to the doctor. You at least go once a year, know where you're at and what's wrong or what's good. It's very important. So, in the end, what does it tell me? Like we already talked about, what does the ROI number tell me? This is just a graph, again, to show you. You always wish you could be, we always rate it 0 to 60, 61 to 80, and 80 to 100. What will it tell me at the end? Again, where am I at from a foundation? I've used my resources properly. I think one of the greatest frustrations for us is we have seen BCM organizations grow from 1 person to 2 to 5 to 10. Yet we see those resources aren't being optimized. They're not being optimized in the areas they need to be. We see high areas of residual risk where these resources could be used to minimize it. We see BCM budgets of a significant nature where the dollars aren't being used. We don't see the risk being reduced over time. Level of execution. Most organizations are doing minimal levels of testing. By using residual risk, you will be easily able to point out the fact that if you're not doing the right level of testing, it's going to heighten your residual risk numbers. Most are still doing desktop, simple walkthroughs. IT is doing standalone testing. And the level of execution will be pointed out by using residual risk. It will show you that you're not executing to the highest level, especially if your management has low risk tolerance, which will require you to have stronger controls. It will also show you the ROI numbers are going to tell you where your risks and gaps are, if you have any. Where are they? Where do they need to be fixed? Is it in our strategies, our plans? Is it in our compliance? Is it in our standards, our policy? These all work together. They don't work separately. All works together, and it's very important to remember that. And lastly, what I think management always wants to know, can I recover, can I not? And by having, again, high compliance, low residual risk, I know my foundation is good, I've executed to the highest number possible, there's a really good chance I'm going to be able to recover. And that's what it all comes down to. And I think a lot of times people were afraid to report on a number because it's going to reflect either badly on us, it's going to be like an audit, we're going to be in trouble. Whereas using this as due diligence, being able to use it so that you can then go back to management and it can help you grow and build your program over time. Very, very important. So in summary, what is return on investment? Again, we talked about that and the new ways to calculate it. Why you should know your return on investment. Again, use it to your advantage. Due diligence. Know where you're at. Defend your resources. Ask for more money. Create new programs. Demonstrate your capability to your organization. How to measure your ROI. We talked about that. It really comes down to 2 key factors. My level of alignment with standards, and secondly, my level of residual risk. Combining those 2, which will give you that 1 ROI number, which really tells you foundation and execution. And by that, you're able to know how well I've invested that. And then lastly, we talked about reporting on ROI. And what we find, again, with ROI reporting is it always goes back to a few things. It goes back to that, what did we not do right in aligning with standards? Did we miss key components, which then flow back to reducing our overall residual risk over time? And again, as I noted, we're always available for questions. We are here too. If you want to email us or send us the questions, please feel free to go to our website. We have a number of services out there, other things, but feel free to send an email if you have additional questions. I'm going to open it up now. Before I do that, our next webinar will be, this is a great title, Get the BS Out of the Business Impact Analysis by Richard Long. And that's a Wednesday, May 10th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So at this point, I'm going to open it up and see who has questions for me. So let me do that. All right. Anybody have questions out there for me?
Michael, this is Catherine.
Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about how this particular approach to measuring ROI, how that relates to kind of the traditional way that we think about it, which is really providing management with those dollar figures How do you see this kind of partnering with that kind of specific dollar measurements?
Well, I think it partners well with it because, again, it just provides an additional layer of hard data. I think that the great thing about this is you're able to show real data as to, have I reduced risk, have I not, in addition to, have I implemented the standard or not, which then goes to say, this all then goes back to what you said initially about that. It goes back to saying, if I have these two pieces in good place, my alignment as well as my residual risk, it goes back and proves what you're saying about here's my potential savings in whether that's reputation, whether it's savings in dollars, outage impact, etc. So it really partners well with that because you have a further way to substantiate what you're saying about the common way we calculate ROI.
Great, thank you.
Michael, this
Any
is
other
Cynthia.
questions?
This
Yes,
is Cynthia. I have a two-part question. The first part is, you referenced 6 controls that you measure where you give, like, I think you said mitigating factors of like 1 to 5. Can you repeat what those 6 control areas were?
Yes, I will repeat those, Cynthia. Thank you for the question. And the question was, again, what were the 6 factors we use for a plan? We use BIA. We use recovery strategy. We use recovery plan, and these are not in any particular order. We use recovery exercise. We use third-party supplier risk. And we use training and awareness. And the last one I want to state, typically number 3, we put recovery plan and team. We make that 1.
Okay. And then my other question, part B of this question was, I know you said that typically you find the weakest points are in the recovery strategy and exercises, and if people put more time there, it would boost the whole program. Where
Yes.
do you find that most people are putting their time?
Wow, they're a lot of times they're spending so many times on so much time on BIA. They're spending so much time on writing plans. A lot of times the plans aren't for what they need to really protect. We see that, and I've told people, have a tiered process to your program, tiered process for investment of time, and really look at, hey, the ones that I need to recover the most, I'm going to spend the most of my time on those and make those the best. So maybe that's 60% of my people's time. The rest is going to be 40%, for example. So make sure, finding a way, a tiered approach to make each of these controls the best for those that have the most impact on your organization.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Cassandra. How are you?
Hi. Good, Cassandra. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, thanks. I did have a question on your residual risk calculation. In the example, I know you
Yes.
did with an RTO against the RTO less than 4. Are you using any other factors to calculate your residual risk?
Yes, we're using because you have to remember, what we had to do was, if you go and look at the traditional residual risk calculation, we had to apply it and make it a model for the way we calculate it in our tool. So what we did is we took a look at their RTO. To calculate inherent risk, we use 2 factors. We look at their RTO, level of criticality, which we call level of criticality or RTO, and then we also use their threat landscape. So that kind of gives us a number as to, based on how critical already the BIA told us the group is, and then in accordance with its threat landscape, and threat landscape being, this happens to be in New York City. There's a lot of threats to the way it does business, et cetera, et cetera. Those 2 factors combined, we added up and we come up with 1 inherent risk number. So that's the inherent risk we're starting with from the business unit or IT recovery plan level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Hopefully that answered the question. Next, any other questions I may answer or comments?
Yeah, this is Kim Casey. I just have a question about the standards. Which standard do you typically use when doing the compliance, which is the one that you prefer?
Well, the interesting part is our BCM, we do have a tool, Compliance Confidence, but we don't use one. We used to only use one, but our client said that wasn't what they wanted. So what we did is our tool now measures you against all of them at one time. But that's what our tool does. We took a superset of everything. which then, if you can comply with that, you're in really good shape because it's a full analysis. Now, if you don't, because I'll be honest with you, some people, as we all know, trying to get a budget to buy, and I won't say which standard, we know some of these standards are expensive, and sometimes, management won't want to purchase them, right? Purchase a license. So there are some that are cheaper than others. If you're just starting, NFPA, National Fire Protection Act 1600, is an outstanding, and they just updated it, and it's a great standard to use as a reference to start with. It's strategic as well as detailed enough that it will get you down where you need to be to really analyzing how compliant am I not. That's a great one to work with. And of course, BCI is good. ISO is good as well. But, if you're just starting, NFPA is a good free one to start with.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? I have a question for the group. Has anyone tried to calculate ROI in their program?
That's something that we're working on this year. This is Calvin from Mercedes-Benz.
Hey, Calvin, it's good to hear from you, sir.
Good to hear from you also, my friend. That's something that we're working on this year. We spent quite a bit of time on that in the past few months, so we'll have an answer for you on that in a little bit.
Well, hopefully, Calvin, did this make any sense or give you some input as to a different way maybe to look at it?
It gave us some different ways to look at it and some additional input as to what we've calculated thus far. So I think it'll be helpful.
Excellent. And one of the things that I'd like to do with this whole subject is, honestly, my team and I have actually talked about getting a group of folks that we could get together to further, expand on this subject and actually build it so that there is somewhat of a, not necessarily a standard way, but at least a way that folks could do this. I think what stops folks from actually, first of all, trying to figure out how aligned they are, number one, with standards, and number two, residual risk, it does take work, and it does take effort to do this. But once you have it done, it becomes a piece of cake because you have the baseline to work from, and you only update what's changed. But it does take some initial upfront work to get this in place and to make it happen. Any other comments or questions before I close?
This is Cynthia. My comment is, this is great. Thank you. And I appreciate that you guys are starting to do webinars. I think that's a great add from your group.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. And I want to thank everyone that was out there today. Thank you for listening. And again, we always look forward to your input. I know all of you will be receiving, we'll make sure you get the presentation. And please feel free, all of you that know me, or just go to our website, contact us. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. So everybody have a great day, and make sure you protect your companies and keep safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.